Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Regroup Show. I am your host, LJ Walker, a real estate investor helping you realize your dreams of owning a home or investing in one. Some of you may know that I actually started short-term rental this year on my one-bedroom apartment that I have upstairs. I am not on Airbnb because there are just too many restrictions in New York City as to, how to go about listing it, too many rules and regulations. I was personally advised by my attorney to list it somewhere else. So I'm on platforms where I can attract travel professionals and travel nurses in particular. All right. But what I've noticed is that many of the people on that particular site don't seem to be in tune with the areas in which they wish to rent temporarily, particularly in New York City. I can see that many of them come from states and cities where things are a lot cheaper. So it seems as though they expect things to be the same here in New York City. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's not. Okay, so let me just give you an idea. What it is this. The average rent today in New York City is $5,000 a month. Yet I see people on the site who say they want a whole house for $1,200 a month maximum. These people, some of them, they want to bring their dog. I know one couple told me that they had 4 cats, even though my ad clearly said no pets. So I'm really not sure why they even responded to me at all. All right. Then there are people who say they want a washer, a dryer, a dishwasher, a backyard, and a porch. On top of all of that, they want to be 20 minutes from the job. So let me help you guys out. Okay. First of all, most of New York City is not a house. Most of New York City, you're getting an apartment. Okay? And sometimes when it says short-term rental, you need to read it clearly, because sometimes they're not even going to rent you the whole apartment. Sometimes they'll rent you a room. And I've even seen situations where the room may have 2 beds. So they may not even be renting you the room, but they may be renting you the bed or the couch. All right. It's only a handful also of New York City apartments where you can actually access a courtyard or a rooftop. Even people who do live in houses in New York City, sometimes they don't want you to have access to those things. All right. Next, some of the buildings in New York City that have washer and dryer may not necessarily have it in the unit. What you also should be open up to is the fact that many of the laundromats that are on the street, they have free pickup and delivery of your clothes. So it's not really going to cost you anything to have them wash. The next thing is, in New York City, the closer that you are to transportation, normally, not always, normally, the more you will pay. And the closer you are to your job, a lot of times, normally, you're going to pay more. And if your job is located, let's say, in Midtown, or if it's located downtown, again, you're going to pay more. Now, in addition to all of this, all right, overall, believe it or not, there's actually a shortage of housing in the city. COVID slowed down construction. As a matter of fact, it didn't just slow down construction, it halted construction for about a year or so. All right. So they're far, far behind. People, yes, you'll see reports saying people are moving out of the city, but believe it or not, a lot of people have moved back into the city because a lot of the amenities that New York City has, they're finding that other cities and states don't have. Okay, so sometimes when they're showing apartments, particularly downtown or midtown, I have a friend who's a realtor. Let me say a clubhouse friend, because we're not that close. Anyway, she was saying that the line for open houses are around the block. So please don't expect there to be like so much supply that landlords are willing to, let's say, rent a whole house or apartment to you for $1,200. It's just not going to happen, especially when the average is $5,000, and there are people willing to pay that much. You might not want to pay that much. That's okay. But why should they choose you when there's somebody else who's willing to pay 4-5 times more than what you're willing to pay? Plus, they're going to stay there a year or more, while you're only going to stay 3 to 6 months. You hear me? Next, the next thing that you need to think about is this. Let's talk about expenses. My tongue. All right. There's high-speed internet, which costs $65 a month, right? Some people might even be able to get that for $45. Then you have electricity costs, right? A lot of times electricity and gas come together, and that's going to be $50 or more depending on the season and depending on how much you use. And some people want the utilities to be included in that $1,200 a month. I don't really see that happening. I'm sorry. That's probably why none of the landlords ever reach out to you. Okay? Because there are some guests, just like there are tenants, who will leave the air condition running, or will leave the heat running all night long, or will leave the lights on even when they are not on property. At least with a tenant, the tenant will pay for the utilities. But when it's a short-term rental, typically the landlord or the owner pays for utilities. So they're not going to, that's another reason why you're not going to get it for $1,200 a month. Next, let's talk about cleaners. There are some guests, I'm not, singling out anybody, but there are some guests who don't clean up after themselves. And then because of COVID, you have to take precautions on how you clean nowadays. You have to go a little bit deeper, right? So cleaners, at minimum, the lowest I've seen is $70 an hour. I've also seen some people who just charge a $200 flat fee. And then lastly, the big price in New York City is the taxes. And those are $9,000 and up. Let's not forget homeowners insurance. Some homeowners insurance doesn't even cover you when you have a short-term rental. So a landlord has to go and get short-term rental insurance. It's not that expensive, but when you add everything up, it does become expensive. Next, for those of you who insist that you want to travel with your pets, pets make noise. They may disturb the owner and the other tenants that may be in the building. They may destroy the property. They may bite another tenant or the owner. And guess what? In New York, if a pet bites someone else, the owner can be sued for what your pet does. So then we have to look at insurance for that. Again, this is one of the reasons why you're going to be hard pressed to find someone who will give you a whole house for $1,200 in New York City, right? Next thing that I'm noticing is that some people, when you look at their profile, some of the guests, there's no picture. And sometimes they don't use their real name. They use another name, a street name. Okay. But then the landlord, they are going to want to know, well, they're going to want your real name, and they're going to want to see a picture. So they're going to want to have some form of ID, because they don't want to let anybody into the building. A lot of these sites, they may have asked you questions, but they don't pass on that information to the landlord or owners of the building. So we're kind of left in the dark. That is one of the reasons why we asked for some form of ID. We don't want to let anybody in to our building. New York City is still, it's not completely safe. It did take a little turn, a negative turn, to be quite honest with you. But you know, it's not that dangerous. Okay. However, to protect the owner, to protect the landlord, to protect the other tenants in the building, we need to see you, and we need to have your correct name. We don't want to be scammed. We don't want to be robbed. And then also, there are some religious groups that do go around ringing doorbells. Not so much since COVID, I've noticed, but I have seen some people passing out tracts. Many owners and landlords, they're very busy. They don't have time to debate or get into any type of philosophical, religious discussion with anybody. Most of the ones that I know don't. So they don't want to open, just because somebody rings the bell, that doesn't mean that they should just open the door. No. So that is one of the reasons why I know myself and others, we require an ID. So I just want to push that out there, send this message mainly to my travel nurses, to my traveling professionals, to pilots and stewardesses out there who are expecting this low price in New York City, and also are wondering, why is ID required? I just want to help you manage your expectations. Okay, $1,200 is just way too low. I would say start at $2,000, and at $2,000, to be honest with you, you probably won't get a Manhattan, a place in Manhattan. You probably will have to look into the Bronx for that particular number. Okay, as a matter of fact, to be quite honest with you, I know a guy, again from Clubhouse. He is in the Bronx, and he charges $4,000 for his apartment. Okay, and he has more than one apartment in his house, guys. So please just note and remind yourself that whatever price you're paying in your city and state, please don't come to New York City. As a matter of fact, I would even beg to say, when it comes to Chicago and Los Angeles, just know that $1,200 is just unrealistic. You need to say okay, I'm going to start at $2,000 and make $2,000 the minimum as opposed to the maximum. All right? Unless you just want a bed instead of the whole place, instead of the whole house or the whole apartment. Okay, so guys, that's all I have for you today. Hopefully this information will help you make smart financial moves. Feel free to pass this amongst your friends. Remember, each one, reach one, teach one. Bye for now. Until next time, have a good night.